Prehistoric humans kept the injured alive because they felt compassion. That is the simple answer, and it may be partly true. But it is also the answer most likely to make us stop asking questions too soon. A healed fracture does not preserve a feeling. A toothless jaw does not tell us who softened the food. A damaged arm cannot reveal who stayed nearby through cold nights, dangerous journeys, or the slow return of strength. The evidence can show survival. It cannot preserve the exact motive. And that is where the real story begins. In a small prehistoric group, an injured person might still remember water sources, animal trails, tool-making methods, medicinal plants, or the history of alliances. Care could protect a relative, preserve knowledge, repay earlier help, or strengthen the trust holding the group together. It could be emotional and practical at the same time. But not everyone may have been protected equally. So the mystery is not simply when humans became kind, it is how injury forced ancient groups to decide what a person was worth after the body could no longer do what it once had done. The first difficulty is hidden inside the title. Prehistoric humans were not one people living in one place with one way of life. The evidence spans different environments, populations, and species from early members of Homo to Neanderthals and Homo sapiens. Care did not appear everywhere at once, and no single fossil can tell us when it began. What bones can reveal is narrower, but still remarkable. A healed fracture shows that its owner survived long enough for new bone to form. A remodeled jaw shows continued life after severe tooth loss. In exceptional cases, the location and severity of an impairment make assistance strongly plausible. But survival is not automatically evidence of constant care. Some injured individuals may have remained mobile. Others could have changed tasks, selected softer foods, or relied on skills requiring less strength. Before claiming that a group carried, fed, or protected someone, we must ask what that person could still do alone and what the injury made impossible. Even with that caution, a pattern emerges. Ancient groups sometimes tolerated prolonged vulnerability. They did not always discard a member when hunting, walking, or chewing became harder. The reasons probably overlapped: attachment, kinship, preserved knowledge, reciprocal obligation, and the advantage of belonging to a group that did not abandon every member after an accident. Repeated encounters with injury may have turned another person's damaged body into a shared problem. And before care could become a moral choice, that body created a brutally practical one. Imagine a small group preparing to move before the weather turns. Meat is running low. Water lies several days away. Everyone who can walk must carry food, tools, hides, or a child. Now, one adult cannot place weight on a leg. The simplest calculation seems merciless. A slower group misses game. A group that stops too long burns through its stores. Two people supporting one body cannot scout, hunt, or defend themselves as effectively. If infection sets in, the injured person needs water, warmth, and food while contributing less in return. Without roads, carts, antibiotics, or permanent shelter, even a survivable injury could threaten everyone nearby. So, abandonment appears rational, and sometimes it probably happened. But that answer assumes that every member's value could be measured by speed, strength, and calories. Human groups also depended on memory. Someone had to remember where water remained during drought, which stone fractured cleanly, when animals crossed a pass, or which plants eased pain without causing harm. A person unable to run might still shape tools, prepare hides, watch children, teach younger hunters, recognize terrain, or mediate conflict. Physical output could decline while practical and social value remained. Injury also was not a rare defect belonging only to the unlucky. In a world of falls, animal attacks, burns, broken teeth, and infected wounds, almost anyone could become dependent without warning. A group that discarded every injured member was declaring what would happen to every healthy member after the next accident. The weak link was not necessarily the wounded person. It may have been a group unable to absorb temporary weakness. But what would care look like after 31,000 years? Deep inside Liang Tabo, a limestone cave in eastern Borneo, archaeologists uncovered the buried skeleton of a young Homo sapiens. The body was almost complete, except for one striking absence. The lower third of the left leg and the entire foot were missing. The ends of the tibia and fibula had remodeled, showing that the person survived the loss of the limb. The original research team interpreted the injury as a deliberate surgical amputation performed during childhood, at least 31,000 years ago. They estimated that the individual lived another 6 to 9 years before dying in late adolescence or early adulthood. That interpretation has been challenged. A later critique argued that a severe open fracture in childhood might also explain the missing lower leg. While the original researchers defended the surgical interpretation, the exact cause remains debated. What is far harder to dispute is the survival. Losing a lower leg can cause catastrophic bleeding. An open wound can become infected. Even after the immediate danger passes, balance, mobility, food gathering, and escape become harder. In the steep forest around Liangtibo, a child recovering from such trauma would have faced years of limitation. The skeleton cannot show the exact treatment, the plants or tools used, or whether one person or many were involved. But the limb healed, the body continued to grow, and the individual remained alive for years after a devastating injury. Someone may have brought food during recovery, protected the wound, shared tasks, or adjusted the group's pace. Each act would have cost time and energy. Liang Tebo does not prove that prehistoric care resembled modern medicine. It shows something more basic. Long before farming, cities, or written medical knowledge, at least one foraging community was capable of sustaining a severely injured person through prolonged recovery. But could individual adaptation explain more than we imagine? And then there is the Neanderthal, whose injuries became a story people wanted to believe. In Shanidar Cave, in the mountains of northern Iraq, archaeologists recovered the remains of an adult male known as Shanidar I. His skeleton records a lifetime of damage. A crushing injury deformed the left side of his face and probably reduced vision in one eye. His right forearm and hand were absent, the upper limb was atrophied, and changes in his legs and feet indicate an abnormal gait. Later analysis identified bony growths in both ear canals, likely causing at least serious unilateral conductive hearing loss. Yet, Shanidar I lived into roughly his mid-30s or 40s. For decades, he has been presented as a portrait of Neanderthal compassion, a disabled man, unable to survive alone, fed and protected by people who refused to abandon him. The interpretation is understandable. His impairments would have increased the risks of hunting, traveling over broken ground, detecting danger, and communicating in noisy surroundings. But the beautiful story becomes less certain when we ask exactly what the bones can prove. Disability is not complete helplessness. Shanidar I may have adapted his movements, relied on his remaining hand, or performed tasks demanding experience rather than speed. We cannot calculate how much food others provided, whether he needed constant assistance, or whether support came from affection, kinship, obligation, practical value, or all of them together. This caution does not empty the case of meaning. It makes the conclusion more precise. Shanidar I survived for years with several serious impairments. Personal adaptation was probably part of that survival. Social accommodation may have mattered too. His companions did not need to carry him every moment for care to exist. They may have shared food during difficult periods, adjusted their pace, reduced certain risks, or allowed him to contribute differently. The strongest lesson is not that Neanderthals practiced perfect charity. It is that a damaged body did not automatically end a person's place in the group. And what if this capacity began long before Neanderthals existed? At Dmanisi, in the Republic of Georgia, archaeologists found the remains of an early member of Homo who lived about 1.77 million years ago. The skull and lower jaw belonged to an older individual who had lost all but one tooth years before death. The empty sockets had healed and remodeled, showing prolonged survival after severe tooth loss. That sounds simple until we imagine what eating required. Without molars, grinding tough food becomes difficult. Meat, roots, and fibrous plants would have demanded a different strategy. The individual may have selected naturally soft foods, sucked marrow, or used the gums and remaining tooth effectively. Another possibility is that companions shared softer portions or processed food. The bones cannot choose between those explanations. There is no preserved hand passing food across a fire. Tooth loss alone does not prove dependence, because humans and other primates can sometimes survive major dental impairment through behavioral adaptation. Yet Dmanisi matters because it pushes social tolerance far deeper into the past. More than 1.5 million years before Shanidar I, an early member of Homo survived for years with a condition that transformed one of the most basic daily acts, eating. This does not prove organized healthcare. It suggests that physical decline did not always end participation in the group. Self-adaptation, food sharing, and social support may have overlapped. Care could have been as ordinary as receiving a softer portion, being allowed more time, or remaining close to others when independent survival became harder. If so, the roots of care may be older than medicine, older than our species, and perhaps older than any moral explanation we would recognize. But why would evolution favor groups willing to absorb such costs? The body created a problem that no stone tool could solve alone. A broken leg did more than prevent hunting. It slowed movement, increased exposure, and made escape from predators more difficult. An open wound could bleed or become infected. Severe tooth loss changed what a person could eat. Damage to hearing or vision made danger harder to detect. For an injured person, survival depended on more than endurance. The surrounding group sometimes had to compensate for what the body could no longer do. Humans were already unusually prepared for that problem. Every human begins life helpless. An infant cannot follow the group, find food, or survive without prolonged attention. Childhood lasts for years, and raising one child often requires help from more than one adult. Long before anyone cared for a wounded hunter or aging relative, members of Homo repeatedly encountered dependence as a normal part of life. That does not mean childcare automatically produced compassion for every injured adult, but it may have helped shape minds practiced in recognizing distress, sharing food, protecting vulnerable bodies, and adjusting behavior around someone who could not keep pace. Emotion mattered because care was expensive. Pain on a familiar face, a voice in distress, or fear of losing a relative could motivate action before any calculation of future value was complete. Those responses also operated inside relationships shaped by kinship, trust, and previous cooperation. There was no single instinct called prehistoric healthcare. Care probably emerged from older capacities working together. Attachment, food sharing, threat detection, memory, and tolerance of temporary dependence. An injured adult may therefore have activated a problem the group already knew in another form. Keep the body warm, bring food closer, stay alert while it cannot, change the pace. But empathy alone could not carry a wounded person across a dangerous landscape. Now, imagine the cost in motion. The dry season is deepening. Water near the camp has begun to fail, and the animals are moving beyond the ridge. Staying is dangerous. Moving is necessary. But one adult cannot walk without help. Two people support the injured body between them. Their hands are no longer free for spears, tools, or children. The group slows on broken ground. Food must be divided with someone who cannot gather it. Every pause consumes daylight. Every detour changes the route. If fever begins, the person may need more water at the exact moment water is hardest to find. Care, in this world, is not a feeling floating above survival. It is weight. It is a shoulder under an arm, a softer portion held back at the fire, a shelter repaired for someone who cannot help build it, a hunter remaining behind while others travel farther. Each decision transfers risk from one body to several. Then, the calculation changes. The injured person recognizes a line of trees in the distance. Beyond it lies a spring the younger members have never seen, or they remember which ledge stays dry during storms, how to bind a spear point, or when a herd usually turns south. The body slowing the group may also carry information the group cannot replace. Not every injured person possessed rare knowledge, and not every rescue succeeded. But in small communities, experience was stored in living minds, not books or maps. Losing one adult could mean losing years of observation, relationships, and technical skill at once. Keeping that person alive preserved more than labor. It preserved options. Once care protected knowledge, trust, and future cooperation, the injured body was no longer only a cost. It became part of a larger social investment. Was the group saving one person or preserving something that existed only because that person remained among them? One reason care could change the calculation was that vulnerability never belonged to only one person. Today, one person breaks a leg. Tomorrow, the strongest hunter may be injured by an animal, a fall, or a weapon slipping in the hand. In a dangerous environment, health is temporary. Sharing the cost of one recovery can protect everyone against a future they cannot predict. Researchers have described Neanderthal healthcare as part of a wider system of risk pooling, alongside cooperative hunting, food sharing, and shared childcare. Support did not need to produce an immediate reward. Its broader benefit was a group in which injury did not automatically become a death sentence. A reliable system of support may also have made necessary risks easier for group members to bear. An older person could continue teaching after strength declined. Someone recovering from fever could remain connected to food and protection until able to contribute again. Care also preserved forms of value that left no mark on bone. But one discovery suggests that usefulness may not explain everything. At Cova Negra, in eastern Spain, researchers examined the inner ear bone of a Neanderthal child who survived to at least 6 years of age. They identified a severe congenital pathology interpreted as consistent with Down syndrome. The child may have experienced serious difficulties with balance and hearing, and the study argued that prolonged survival probably required assistance extending beyond the mother alone. The diagnosis and exact level of dependence remain interpretations. The case matters because a young child had little ability to repay years of care through labor or specialized knowledge. Perhaps that is where care became larger than exchange. A group did not need a spoken theory of human worth. It only needed to behave as though membership continued through dependence. Food was still shared. The pace was adjusted. The vulnerable person still occupied space near the fire. Repeated decisions like these may have transformed belonging from a reward for immediate usefulness into something more durable. A person could remain one of us even when the body could not repay the cost. But belonging has never guaranteed equal protection. The archaeological record is uneven. A healed fracture preserves evidence that someone survived. Neglect rarely leaves an equally recognizable signature. A person who died soon after being abandoned may look no different from someone who died alone during a hunt, migration, or accident. The people who received enough support to heal are therefore easier to see than those who did not. This does not make prehistoric care an illusion. It means we are looking through a narrow window. Reconstructing care depends on pathology, environment, mobility, burial context, and the individual's likely ability to compensate. It cannot reveal every decision made around every vulnerable person. Resources also had limits. A group facing starvation, extreme cold, conflict, or forced movement may have been unable to help even when attachment was strong. Some injuries were beyond anything prehistoric knowledge could treat. Social value may not have been distributed equally either. Kinship, age, skill, reputation, status, expected recovery, and previous relationships could all have influenced who received support. Help may have carried obligations. A person could be protected because they were loved, but also because they held authority, controlled knowledge, or belonged to the right family. Care was probably neither universal nor unconditional. The same communities capable of extraordinary support could also exclude, neglect, or abandon. Human cooperation has always existed beside competition and scarcity. That darker possibility should not erase the evidence of care. It prevents us from turning prehistoric people into symbols of perfect kindness. Their achievement was more complicated. Under difficult conditions, some groups chose to absorb another person's vulnerability, even though they could not or did not make that choice for everyone. The tools have changed. The ancient question has not. A person collapses on a sidewalk, and strangers reach down before they know the cause. A family rearranges work, sleep, and money around someone recovering from surgery. An employee is paid while too ill to work. Insurance spreads the cost of one body's failure across thousands of people who may never meet. A hospital is a modern institution filled with technologies no prehistoric group could imagine. But the social decision inside it is ancient. How much will the group invest in a person who cannot survive alone? Modern care extends far beyond relatives around one fire. It is organized through medical systems, disability support, emergency services, sick leave, taxes, and insurance. The scale is different. The underlying principle is familiar. When healthy, people contribute labor, knowledge, money, attention, or protection. When injured, they draw from resources created with others. No one controls exactly when the body will fail. Risk is shared because vulnerability cannot be scheduled. We still argue over who deserves care, how much it should cost, and where responsibility ends. Ancient inequalities have not disappeared. They have become laws, budgets, waiting lists, insurance rules, and family decisions. Yet the impulse remains visible in smaller moments. A hand steadies an older person on a stair. Someone cuts food into softer pieces. A blanket is pulled over a patient who cannot adjust it alone. These gestures are ordinary because dependence is ordinary. They do not prove that modern society is naturally compassionate. They show that human communities are still organized around a problem strength cannot eliminate. Every capable body is temporary. What prehistoric care ultimately protected was not simply the injured. It protected the possibility that any member could become vulnerable without immediately becoming disposable. Return to the bones. A fracture closes. An empty jaw remodels. A damaged arm belongs to a person who lived for years after the injury. In Borneo, a young body continued growing after the lower leg was gone. None of these remains preserves the moment someone decided to help. They cannot tell us whether care began with affection, obligation, fear of future loss, respect for knowledge, or the expectation that support would be returned. The answer probably differed between groups and between individuals. But the pattern reveals something larger. Prehistoric communities sometimes spent food, time, protection, and physical effort on people whose bodies could no longer perform as before. They did not always do so, and they may not have treated everyone equally. Yet, often enough, weakness became something the group absorbed, rather than a sentence one person faced alone. Near the fire, an injured individual could still remember, teach, repair, or simply remain present. Care protected skills and relationships. It also protected a more fragile idea. Membership did not have to end when immediate usefulness declined. Perhaps prehistoric humans kept the injured alive because compassion, knowledge, kinship, and survival had already become impossible to separate. The beginning of human care was not simply the moment we learned to save the weak. It was the moment another person's weakness became a danger none of us had to face alone.